So I have to be quick as well because we're running out of time. We did start by thinking where should our focus be, and I think we're probably in alignment with many people in the room, considering that line managers and CEOs play quite an important role. So we had a chat about what can happen, what should happen, how the line manager that can empower an environment where diversity, equality, and inclusion are developing should look like. So we looked at and we discussed about authentic role modeling. We talked about individual participation. We talked about leaders and line managers in particular who are sort of in between, having people that report to them and they're having a CEO above or not. Them having this possibility of putting themselves in a position of vulnerability, but also feeling and creating an environment of safety. We spoke about emotional intelligence needed at different levels in an organization, having this form of openness and curiosity. And I really liked your example, right, when you were talking about how perhaps some of us would like our line managers to have that humility about admitting that they do not understand at times what diversity is, what different forms of diversity are, right, rather than assuming, positioning themselves as a person that knows it all. Definitely in terms of technical skills, but also people skills. So looking for that humility and cultural intelligence, but also looking at agency, right? Making sure that line managers have that agency, feeling that they can influence an environment, and they can create an environment with other people have the same agency as well. I probably ran very quickly through, what our idea, the position of a line manager would be. Some of the barriers include, and I'm just going to pick some up and let my colleagues jump in. We spoke about lack of support, resources and time. We can't assume that someone in a position of being a line manager necessarily don't want to do things right. They might really not know how to do that. They might not have the time. They might not have the support. D&I might be the last thing on their list, not because they consider it not to be a priority. We also spoke about other challenges that come from the environment, like the D&I fatigue, right? There's so much more discourse around equality, diversity, and inclusion that people are getting a bit fed up and they don't engage with it anymore, right? So there is that sort of reluctancy that comes from that. So there's a fatigue from the discourse. There's also fear, right? Fear of getting it wrong. So we avoid what we hear, of course. What else? Lack of understanding of differences. Another problem is, again, what is environmental or organizational culture level tokenism. Right? There are so many problems around diversity and inclusion, and we tick boxes, and we can say that we've done things. We also spoke about lack of curiosity that can come as a consequence of fatigue, lack of time, etc. We spoke about not only the discourse around D&I being very popular, but also being weaponized at times. So again, generating a spiral of fear. So these are some of the challenges. What else? What did I miss in terms of barriers?
I think that's most of them. Okay, a job a short time. Yeah.
then.
Shall I just do this little bit?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so this is all a bit vague, to be honest. We were just throwing out ideas, but we kind of, as we were coming down to the kind of hack before the hack, we were thinking about like the what and the how. So really kind of the utopia situation was that everyone's having really healthy, open, empowering conversations where everyone feels safe and there's no consequences in speaking your truth and everyone says your name right and all that kind of thing. But it's like, how are we going to get there? So one of the the first thing that came up was kind of to combat the fear of getting it wrong, and particularly in situations where you essentially need to ask questions, which everyone is kind of not doing, which is one of the main problems, I think, is to have kind of reference guides or easy resources where you can just kind of like get the basics of like, don't say that, recognize this, think about this, that kind of thing, so that you can then be able to start a conversation that is safe and create that environment for someone to be able to share what they need to. So that was kind of a top thing. And then we jumped straight into And we wondered if there's a lot more involved in this, and I think there is. That's the bit that we haven't got to. But really, it was kind of after that bit of kind of like, well, I'm not going to say a really bad thing. Really, ideally, we throw ourselves into that conversations, because I feel like that's where the learning is. You know, another workshop labeled DEIB, telling you have to do this in an authoritarian way, is not conducive to people actually being and living in a different way. So really, ideally, we'd get into those conversations. So we talked about the EIG groups and the ways you could do that, talked about flat structures, and then kind of in reality, how are you going to create a flat structure? Because if you take the group into a boardroom, as much as they might say no one's leading here, everyone's going to be conscious that their line manager is there or the C-suite is there or whatever. So again, we thought about kind of creating environments that were conducive to that. So as much as in some ways it sounds like throw a breakfast at it is a bit like whatever, actually eating together is, you know, a social and culturally known thing to bring things together. So kind of creating those spaces and adding little ingredients to make people feel safer and more comfortable. And that's kind of where we got with that. Have I missed anything?
I think the biggest thing came from how do we get leaders to feel that that individually themselves, so that they move. So we talk about head, heart, and hands. It's about people don't do anything unless they're really motivated by their heart, and so very much around how do we help take them on a journey where they have psychological safety to admit that they don't know or to admit that they're learning. And you've got to do that, you know, individually, but you've got to do that in a safe environment for leaders as well, because we can't all of a sudden just say, well, you're the leader, so you should know of it. You should know everything.
Just sort of summing up for you before Lynn takes over. Sorry, the all on the top of this is that we remembered that we were here for intersectionality, and we had a long conversation at the beginning talking about the fact that yes, it's the layering, and we understand the difference of the layering and greater than some of the two parts and everything. Actually, in practice, the best way to get to that is for everyone to be able to kind of express themselves freely, and whether that be, you know, it might not be a diagnosis, it might be something to do with your personality or whatever our differences are, being open to individuality, really. Yeah.
So the jazz club at the end, we came up with the jazz club hierarchy of line management proficiency on D&I. And it's a gimmick, but actually it's not in terms of actually what are the basics that a line manager just needs to know. And we all know the line managers who just need to know that, or they only focus on how do I keep out of jail? How do I make sure I need to know that there's an Equal Pay Act? I need to know that there's an Equality Act, or I just need to know that what's right and what's wrong. And there's a whole load of line managers who operate at that level. They then, some of them actually then operate within the policies in your own organisation as well, and they might know a few of those. But actually, there's this fundamental basic of you just need to know some stuff. So actually, how do we help our line managers just go? This is the basic. You know, how many of us really have a job description of a line manager in our organisation? We generally put our job descriptions as, you know, sales of this, marketing that, solutions architect, whatever. But we miss out on the leadership part of really describing what a line manager is all about. So actually, can we start to spell out what are the basics that you absolutely need to know? But then if you want to be, you know, a little bit more of a, you know, sort of a more sophisticated line manager, it's actually then you get into the team building, getting to know your team, getting to understand differences, getting to really be interested in your team. Every line manager loves that because that's team building. So it's not dressed as D&I and DIB and all that. It's actually, I'm interested in my people, my team, and all of those things that go with it. And as we go up the sort of maturity scale, you then get into, well, what are the differences? And can we share some stories? Can we do into sort of storytelling within the team? Can I really understand what's going on for people? Can we share those within a team? And then you then add on the layering of intersectionality and say, wow, gosh, there's many different facets and nuances to these stories. You then start to become a real role model as a leader. If you're able to talk more emphatically, because you're learning, you're really actively learning is through your own team, but you're also interested in others. And the top of the hierarchy really then is when you get into this active allyship, and you're then championing other causes. You're putting yourself out there to make sure that it's not just you and your team or your knowledge and things. You're helping to teach others. You're coaching others. You're a role model, and you're actually then influencing the policies. So going back down the hierarchy in terms of the line manager, the best thing for a line manager for us is to know that line managers get it, is that they start to challenge your own policies because you think you've actually read them. So it's that sort of sense of, gosh, we could shape this, or this isn't working for us. Maybe we need to change this. And so getting that sort of real sort of continuum of learning for leaders. But it really sort of, we started at the beginning of what our tasks are, and there's a lot of people learn in different ways. So it's appealing to the learning styles of people. And so some people like to go and go, God, I'm not willing to admit I don't know this. So where do I go to learn in private? In my own safety. Other people want to do focus groups and understand and talk to each other. So it's about being able to have, a real suite and spectrum of resources for people, but then use nudge theory. And this is probably a good nudge theory to sort of visualize for people to then say, well, if you want to be a super leader, then actually work your way up this pyramid. That's where we got to.